Hello, everyone. My name is Weldon Wade, and welcome to episode 1 of the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program's Beachside Chat. Thank you so much for tuning in. I can't wait to get started. Let's just give everyone a couple of minutes to jump on the live. No, a couple of seconds, really. Welcome to episode 1. Let me turn that down. Bermuda Ocean Prosperity. Boom. That's fixed. Cool. A couple seconds to jump on the live. Thank you so much for tuning in. All right. I think we're just about ready to get things going. So yeah, what is BOPP? So the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program is a partnership between the government of Bermuda, the Waite Institute, and the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences, or BIOS. The goal of the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program is to foster the sustainable, profitable, and enjoyable use of ocean resources for present and future generations. But you might be wondering who's involved. So we have our founding partners that I mentioned already, but we've also got a well-established steering committee. So we have the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, we have the Bermuda Business Development Agency, the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, the Bermuda Tourism Authority, the Department of Planning, the Regulatory Authority, the Environmental Authority, the Historic Wrecks Authority, the Commercial Fisheries Council, the Marine Resources Board, the Estate Section Ministry of Public Works, the DOE, Department of Energy, Department of Marine and Ports, and the Bermuda National Trust. We also have staff on board, Cheryl Ann Mapp, myself, and Sarah Brooks. We also have supporting partners, the Bermuda Zoological Society and Look Bermuda. We also have a science committee, and I won't name everyone that's on that. This introduction would be super long. We've got our science committee, our administration team. We also have Ocean Village participants and volunteers. So the goals of BOPP, we've got 3 pillars. We've got our thriving blue economy pillar. And what we want to do there is assist Bermuda with the diversification of its national revenue and strengthen the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods and jobs, and continued ecosystem health. Our second pillar, marine spatial planning. We want to develop and legally adopt an enforceable, comprehensive EEZ-wide marine spatial plan designed to sustainably manage resources and protect 20% of Bermuda's waters as no-take fisheries replenishment zones. Number 3, sustainable fisheries. We want to improve fisheries management where appropriate and partner with stakeholders to support Bermuda's fisheries goals through consultations, scientific research, and economic analysis. So benefits, tons of them, right? We've got more fish and healthier ocean ecosystems, improved livelihoods and jobs, long-term planning for tourism and ocean economies, increase environmental and economic resilience to local and global stressors. So lots of work going on, right? We believe the ocean is an important component in Bermuda's recovery from the global pandemic we're still in and offers an abundance of opportunities to grow a healthy economy that benefits everybody. The Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program is working to create a comprehensive plan to sustainably use, manage, and protect the ocean, a plan which will help the economy and ensure healthy fisheries and marine ecosystems for future generations. This is something that we cannot do without your help. You check out our website, we've got a pretty awesome project timeline. We have the signing of our MOU, we have governance and work planning, we've got assessments, planning and legal development, and then implementation. So how do you get involved in this Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program? Check out our website, email Cheryl, and we'll definitely pull you into the loop. So what's important to recognize is we see right before our eyes how rapidly the world is changing, and threats to our people, our livelihoods, and the environment are complex and increasingly interlinked. Cross-sector partnerships are today seen as essential to achieving sustainable development and therefore central to the achievement of our goals. Partnerships across sectors are a means to tackle the complex social and environmental challenges our island and the world faces. Partnerships also provide new opportunities for businesses and organizations to pursue value creation by aligning objectives, recognizing the specific competencies that each sector can bring to the collaboration, and finding ways to harness these and create shared value for everybody. So that's a lot. But what we have three really amazing panelists that are going to join me to talk about science and policy. So we have Dr. Eric Hochberg. He was born and raised in Tampa, Florida. He earned a BA in biology from Brown University in 1991, then lived and worked in Taiwan for 3 years before moving to Hawaii. Never been, it's pretty dope. He earned a master's in science in 1998 and a PhD in 2002, both from the Department of Oceanography at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. He was assistant researcher at the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology from 2002 to 2008, then assistant professor at Northeastern University from 2008 to 2011. He joined the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences as an associate scientist in 2011, advancing to the senior scientist level in 2009. Eric's research focuses on coral reefs with primary interests including environmental and biological optics, community ecology, and remote sensing, all aimed at understanding reefs at the ecosystem scale. The overarching goal is scaling functional ecology, across organisms, communities, and whole reefscapes to better understand how reef ecosystems work, as well as to better predict their futures in the era of global change. Eric was principal investigator for the NASA Earth Venture Suborbital 2 mission, or CORAL for short, Coral Reef Airborne Laboratory, the first ever project to quantitatively map reef benthic cover at the region scale. This resulting data highlight limitations in our understanding of the relationships between geophysical forcings and reef condition. Eric served on the ecosystems panel for the National Academy's latest decadal survey for the Earth science and applications from space. He is also on the board of editors for remote sensing of environment and is associate editor of Frontiers of Marine Science and Coral Reef Research. It's quite a lot going on there, Eric. Thank you so much for being on board.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cool. Moving on to our next panelist real quick. Dr. Tammy Warren is a Senior Marine Resources Officer for the Bermuda Government, Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and leads the team that is responsible for the management of all marine resources within Bermuda's 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. Dr. Warren started her career as a marine biologist at the Bermuda Biological Station for Research, which is now BIOS, and since joining the Bermuda government in 1995, she has worked on all aspects of fisheries, from biological research to stock assessments to strategic planning, policy, and legislation. Dr. Warren assumed her current position in 2009 and subsequently guided the drafting of a strategic vision for the Marine Resources section, which included an initiative to develop a marine spatial plan for Bermuda's waters. She is now part of the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program's administrative team that is facilitating the development of a marine spatial plan and blue economy strategy. To improve marine livelihoods while preserving the health of the ocean around Bermuda. Dr. Warren also represents Bermuda's marine resources interests in international forums, such as the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas, and lead negotiations for the United Kingdom's Overseas Territories delegation for many, many years. So this experience, in conjunction with the Bermuda's role in efforts to better manage the Sargasso Sea, led to her being appointed to the Sargasso Sea Commission in 2014. Dr. Warren's professional interests include sustainable fisheries management, ecosystems-based management, and the biology of both coral and pelagic fishes. Thank you, Dr. Warren, for joining us. Yes. And finally, Dr. Robbie Smith is on our panel. Dr. Robbie Smith has been the curator of the Natural History Museum at the Bermuda Aquarium Museum and Zoo since 2009. He has been active with research projects to assess the patterns of abundance and diversity of Bermuda's reef and shore fishes and the impacts of invasive lionfish and the prevalence of coral diseases, which is important. Dope work. He is completing a long-term study on changes in the sargassum community. Robbie has worked with the Bermuda Marine Debris Task Force to assess the amount of plastic marine debris in our environment. He has supported diverse local and visiting graduate student projects, particularly the consumption of microplastics by fishes and the occurrence of novel marine invertebrates in our harbors. He was lecturer in biology at Georgia State University in the 2000s, working extensively on the reefs in the Florida Keys. And in the 1990s, he was an assistant researcher scientist at BIOS, where he carried out long-term studies on Bermuda seagrass, mangrove, and reef communities. He has authored or co-authored 42 peer-reviewed research articles, 10 books, chapters, and 2 books. That covers that.
Glad to be here, Weldon. Nice to see everybody.
Thank you so much, panelists, for taking time out of your Thursday night. I believe today's Thursday, to hang out with us. So what I want to do is get us started off by talking to policy and the history of Bermuda leading in ocean management. Dr. Warren, did you want to speak to that?
Sure. So Bermuda has a very long history of ocean policy. So I'm not going to go into depth into all of the early policy, but I will say that we are known to have, we think, the earliest fisheries legislation enacted in 1620, when we protected young turtles. And if you know the history of Bermuda, you know that Bermuda was settled in 1609. So this was not too long after settlement, and they were already having an effect on young turtles. And so they had a ban on fishing for those. And then there were various acts enacted over the years, including a ban for fishing for porgies in the 1600s, and also a fish pot ban, which people may not know, was enacted in the 1700s. So that was, 200 years before we had our current fish pot ban in 1990. So I'll jump ahead to the legislation that we have in place today. So the overarching legislation for management of our resources is the Fisheries Act and regulations and orders that come under the Fisheries Act. And that was put in place, as I said, in 1972. And this is another interesting tidbit that people might not know, is that it was actually the Commercial Fisheries Association, Commercial Fishermen's Association, who had a big hand in putting these laws into place. They were very concerned about, the resources and the waste of some of the resources. And they put together in, I think it was 1971, they put together a document which became known as the 26 points. And they presented that to government. And this is where a lot of our legislation now comes from, the 1972 Act. And so they were very, they wanted to protect the resources, and they were very active in bringing things to government to do so. From that Fisheries Act, we now have the Protected Species Act and orders under that, which protects threatened and endangered species and overfished species. So those are the main pieces of legislation, and just like a brief history of our ocean policy.
Nice. Thank you so much for that. That's really amazing snapshot. I knew about the green turtle bit, but I didn't know anything since then. We always speak to our protection, early legislation protection of the green turtle. So that's really amazing. Thank you so much for your insight. That's really cool. I got a lot more research to do. Gotta do my history. I wasn't too, history wasn't my biggest topic in high school. So I need to, crack that open and do a little bit more of my history here. I must admit, I'm not the most fantastic at that. But switching gears to just the science side of things, because science tends to be the cornerstone, if not the driver of making these decisions in most cases. So I wanted to direct this question to the entire panel, really, but Dr. Hochberg or Dr. Smith, if you want to take on what do you think is really the importance of science in making these policy decisions? Is it relevant, irrelevant? Nobody, do we care? Do we not care? Of course, gotta have that.
Robbie, you want to go?
To me, science is just, a very programmatic way of collecting information. If you have that information and you can evaluate that information, you'll come to some conclusion. If you have a robust conclusion based on good data, you'll make the right decision, and so we got to that point back in the late 80s when we could see so few fishes on our reef, so few of the fishes that we value, that we had to do something. And we had good evidence from the fishery statistics, from some in-water work, that we need to change our fishing practices. It was contentious at the time, but ultimately it's proven to have worked. And that picture behind Tammy is proof of that, that having a robust spawning aggregations of our black groupers and other groupers is proof that when you have good information, you can make a good decision, you can defend it. People can listen and then learn and then accept the fact that you can make changes, and those changes are generally going to be beneficial. In the short run, there's some pain sometimes. So the point really is like science is a way of approaching a problem. How do we get information to help us figure it out? Because you have to, not as a scientist, convince other scientists, but you want to convince politicians, people in the public, people in the media, and there's a lot of ways to spread information around, as you know. And so to be able to put forth an idea, say, here's what we know about this. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it. BOPP's a good example of trying to gather information, put it in one place, have people, contribute to it, and get to some consensus about where we might be going forward. And I hope we were going to accomplish that. So can't do much out without good data. Sometimes you have to make some precautionary decisions because you can't get the data, or the data is very insufficient. So being precautionary, you sort of say, okay, until we get more information, we have to sort of change something, and then and people generally go along with that, because going down the same road or digging in the same hole is going to get you further into trouble unless you are willing to make some changes. So that's my opinion. I'm sure Eric has something to contribute.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly, Robbie, that the science can help make informed decisions, and as Robbie said, science provides the information, not always complete. And another point that I would add is that it's often changing. You learn new things as you do further study. You find out new information. You find out, no, it doesn't quite work that way. Maybe we should change we get new information, so the policymakers might change their policy depending on what you learn as new knowledge is gained. And science provides, ideally, that reliable information, so people aren't just guessing or thinking, oh, this feels right. No, you take the reliable information and make a decision based on it to the best of the ability. And if there's no information, as Robbie said, you can always take a precautionary approach. If there is information available, then you can weigh all the factors. And that's what science does, is it provides that information. So I'm really just echoing what Robbie said. He said it very well.
Thank you. Dr. Warren, what's your opinion on the importance of science in making these decisions that affect policy and legislation?
I think my two panelists have said it very well. I don't think I have very much more to add there. As they said, it helps us to make informed decisions, and policies do change as a result of new science and new information being gained.
Great, thank you so much for that. As we know what the name of this program is, Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program. We want to protect the ocean and provide jobs, livelihoods, sustain the health of the ocean, do it all in this holistic way. But it's one of those things where I find like sustainability, people are like, well, what does that mean? What does it boil down to? So I guess my question would be, and I can direct this to Dr. Smith, starting off with you, sir, is what is ocean prosperity, and what does it mean to you, and how do we get there, in your opinion?
Well, I think the aspiration in prosperity is that we can have our human society benefiting from reasonable use of our resources, and those resources are going to be able to continue to function the way that we expect them to, based on either what they've done in the past or perhaps improve in terms of how well stocks of fishes or invertebrates or the health of corals is sustained through time. And so the prosperity comes in lots of different ways, and it isn't always necessarily measured by money. Money is a good way to see benefits of our environment being translated into jobs and livelihoods. But the satisfaction people have to jump overboard, to walk along the shoreline and appreciate directly that the ecosystem is healthy, and they get a buzz out of being able to explore it and enjoy it, to be stimulated by it, and then perhaps get to eat some of it from time to time. So that prosperity, we hope, is going to be something we're going to achieve here, in terms of continuing to find value in our natural resources, whether you eat them or look at them, it doesn't really matter. That's going to benefit a wider, broader spectrum of Bermudians for a longer period of time. And we've got a long way over 400 years by making decisions, and it was pretty easy back in the 1600s, because a bunch of guys just said, we're going to make the change. And today we aim to be more democratic by being able to share information, have forums such as this to be able to discuss things, to get people's opinions, because not all scientists and politicians know everything all the time, and people can bring you information and knowledge, and you absorb that, and then you have developed a consensus. So for us is to get to the next episode in our island's future, we need to be working on that. I think BOPP's provided the opportunity for us to pause, look at what we've got, and figure out where the opportunity is to do intelligent things in terms of how we use our natural resources, and keep them moving along so we can all enjoy and benefit them.
Yeah, that's I love how you put that, Dr. Smith. Dr. Hochberg, what are your thoughts about what ocean prosperity is to you, and what does it mean in the context of your lens, having done all the wonderful work you've done?
Well, honestly, whatever I say here would just be a restatement of what Robbie just said. And so I'll do that. It's the ocean, its resources, and the human population together succeed, and that's what it is, and it's everything that was just said. And it's not always going to be perfect. There will be challenges. There always will be, because things change, storms come, and pandemics occur. But in the long run, you have your natural resources that benefit people, and hopefully people will do their best to benefit the natural resources.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that answer. But what I want to do is make sure everyone on the line recognizes that you're at the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences, which is one of our founding partners of this program. So it's wonderful to have you on the panel for that reason and many other reasons. But what I wanted to do is ask a question about, I remember passing what was the Bermuda Biological Station for research when I was going to high school, and then the name changed. I just remember this big institute right on the ocean. It's a beautiful spot, lots going on there. But what role can scientific institutions like BIOS have on influencing policy?
Well, it's sort of speaking to what we had talked about before.
Okay.
So here at BIOS, we do a lot of what we call fundamental research, basic research. We have ideas that are, we find issues. We don't find them. Issues raise themselves. And the scientists here try to address those issues. Often we have a regional to global bent. Often it's a local aspect. So on occasion, I have had the fortune to to do some work with the Bermuda government to look at various aspects of the local nearshore ecosystems and give my information, and then they can take that information to make policy as needed, or don't change policy as the information suggests. So what we do here is we try to address the issues. And of course, the big ones these days are global change. And so we try to address a lot of this global ocean. The earth is warming, the ocean is warming, the ocean's sucking up CO2. These are things that affect the global ocean, but Bermuda is part of the global ocean, and Sargasso Sea is part of the global ocean. So the focus is here locally, and it's often sort of extrapolated. What does this mean for the world? But it can also be taken as, what does this mean for Bermuda? And that can be done, and it is done. So and we provide that information and we make it available. Sometimes it's directly requested. Sometimes we just sort of publish it. And then people like Tammy and her colleagues can take that information and decide whether anything needs to be done, anything needs to be changed.
No doubt, for sure. And thank you for all the wonderful work you and your colleagues do down there at BIOS. But like, one of the things I talk at length about is the connection between ocean health and human health, and really trying to get people out there to better understand the ocean, and the whole Baba Diem quote, right? You protect what you love, and trying to get people engaged and just care more about the ocean. But so my question for you, Dr. Smith, is how, and we touched on some of this already, but how do ecosystems like what's in the Sargasso Sea, these seagrass beds we touched on earlier, maybe offline, in fact, mangroves and coral reefs and all these sort of cornerstones of our ecosystem, how do they affect humans? In other words, if we woke up tomorrow and we don't want this, and those cornerstones were in collapse, how would that affect us? And then beyond that, the climate and economic benefits, like, in other words, what do we actually get from the ocean? If we were to take that away, what are we looking at? What kind of a world are we looking at?
Well, there's some really easy to understand examples of how Bermuda's society benefits from a healthy ocean. And that's really looking at sea level rise, as Eric touched on. We're certainly very familiar with how quickly our ocean is warming, and that causes expansion, and plus the melting water coming off our caps. So, sea level is going up around 2.2 millimeters per year, and that's, like, in my lifetime, it's gone up. I got a ruler here, almost 8 centimeters. Ignore the Man City ruler. So that's a lot. And so without our coral reef to continue to grow at the pace that it has been able to sustain over the last several thousand years, after the last ice age kind of slowed down, now we're picking up again, we're going to lose that protective barrier. It's absorbing storm energy. And if the storms get stronger and more powerful, and we're not quite sure what that is, but it's probably going to happen that way because a lot of energy goes into our ocean system. That's heat. That heat translates into storms, which we know too well we don't like in Bermuda. So without a healthy reef system able to grow and keep up with that sea level rise, then our defenses go down and the waves come in, and the destruction on our nearshore environment will be pretty dramatic. So in the case of how Bermuda functions, we have a carbon economy. We import carbon, we burn it, it goes up into the atmosphere, into the ocean, and we have carbon sinks here, and that's have been our seagrass beds, our reef to some extent, and also our mangroves, and particularly seagrass and mangroves that now really become fully comprehended in terms of their value in storing really large quantities of carbon. And unfortunately, 400 years plus of development has seen an awful lot of our mangroves go away for different reasons, just for coastal development, construction of our airport. And sadly, we're looking at a point in time where our seagrass beds are just obliterated. And just talking before we started about what I didn't see up in Long Bay and Somerset today, is just a big change in the equation. So if Bermuda was doing a good job of using carbon and having carbon stored in our natural ecosystems, that balances out, and we don't have a net negative impact. But
Mhm.
we're losing those carbon sinks here. And there's no one real easy answer why that is, except we know we chop down the mangroves. Should we be doing more? Well, those ideas have been proposed within BOPP and within the Bermuda government to think about how we can tackle that. The seagrass is a bit more complicated, but my colleague, Dr. Sarah Manuel, is busy trying to protect
Yep.
seagrasses where they're still in existence here with cages to slow down the consumption by turtles. But turtles, we need to protect them. They need some food. So yes, there's a lot of value to Bermuda in terms of what the ocean delivers for us in terms of things that we can eat and consume. But the stability of our systems like mangroves and seagrasses and corals are really essential if we're going to have a functioning nearshore environment here. And losing our reefs in some context because they can't keep up with sea level rise or the coral can't grow in a more acidic ocean, which is a consequence of all the carbon dioxide accumulating in the surface waters of the ocean. That's a big unknown. And some really great studies have been done at BIOS by an early postdoc, Andreas Anderson, and his team, and Dr. Samantha Duputron, along with Nick Bates, have really looked at how our corals are able to cope with this change of temperature and ocean acidity. They're doing okay, pretty good, but that could change. As Eric said, we gather information, we understand the state of play today, 10 or 20 years down the road, how the corals are going to be coping, sorry. I'm not sure yet. Right now, we look like we have some window of time. We can reset our planetary carbon balances. Maybe our reefs will hold up. So I hope that gives you some idea of the significance of the challenges and the value, particularly of our reefs as our physical barrier. It absorbs that wave energy from hurricanes, and we really need that. Thanks.
I mean, I thank you, Dr. Smith. The reef does so much for us, and I never want to assume that everyone in our audience tuning in either live or on the replay, are necessarily switched on. It's difficult for me to even talk to family about some things because, they just don't care. And what happens is you find that, you'll care when it affects you. And just looking around, it's amazing how, we take so much for granted. It's not just the beautiful color of the water and the big, fish that we see as we're snorkeling around, but when something like practical happens where you're like, oh, that's a problem. For example, crystal caves. I recognized recently that sometimes they can't even have people walk the gangway to the end of the cave because the sea level is so high, the bridge is hitting the ceiling. So I'm like, I had no idea, right? But the owners and operators and guides of crystal caves are well aware of when we have those super high tides, the king tides and the 80 tides and all that stuff, that, hey, we have a problem because, the bridge will hit the ceiling. And what's cool is, you learn about the stalactites and stalagmites and the whole 25,000 years and millions of years of development and watching the rocks grow and stuff. It's pretty wild. But, certainly, Dr. Warren, what I'd love to touch on, because we got some stuff, we know what's going on for all intents and purposes on our reef, and we put things in place to help at least keep things at a reasonable baseline. But can you share a success story of fisheries regulation? And I know, some fishermen, again, watching this live or on the replay are like, yeah, it's restrictive, it's tight. Well, I've been to some other countries where it's a lot more restrictive than Bermuda is. And it's important for people to recognize that what we have in place, like I believe it's okay. But if you can share a success story of some regulations that are in place that have actually been wonderful for our ecosystem and for science, and then as a result in policy, that'll be great.
Sure. Dr. Smith mentioned a little while ago, he talked about my background here, which is a spawning aggregation of black grouper. And we've been doing some work all over the years on black grouper. But one of the things that came up in the 70s was they were looking at spawning aggregations of red hine, and there was a lot of waste of red hine. It was actually a trash fish. I mean, we love it today, but then they used it for, it was just trash. They didn't really eat it. And so the fishermen were really concerned about protecting spawning aggregations of red hine. And they were protected in the mid 1970s. And I think it was probably one of the first in the region. And today we are still benefiting from that because we're having fairly healthy red hind populations
So
because
cool.
of the protection of these spawning aggregations. And we also have a minimum size on the red hinds. So all of that goes to helping to maintain those populations. And then we talked about the fish pot ban, and as somebody said, it was very controversial at the time. But there have been advantages to that as well, particularly with parrotfish. So many people see the colorful parrotfish around our shores. They were taken and filleted. So they have been fully protected, and the banning of fish pots has helped to keep the take down. Well, not to take them, but before they were banned, it helped to keep that take down and helping them to replenish. And now that they're fully protected, they are really growing. Unfortunately, some of our other species have not come back, but that is one of the success stories.
That's amazing. And I think it's important for people to recognize that the unassuming parrotfish, the fish, I'm 43 years old, so I grew up in a time where eating parrotfish was, no bueno. Like if it was colorful, my grandfather taught me to leave it alone. If it's gray, it was okay. If it's got color, leave it alone. But this unassuming, parrotfish is like the rock star of snorkeling off like Tobacco Bay and other areas that are hot spots to just have a light snorkel, because when you're snorkeling and you'd hear this insanely loud crunching, and I'll have people out, friends out, and I'm like, yeah, there's parrotfish, watch out, there's a big one nearby. And you'll see like a massive 3-foot parrotfish, and they're like, wow, they grow so big. And I'm like, yeah, because they're protected. We don't, it's illegal to harvest them and take them out of the ocean, and they do so much good for the ocean in terms of keeping the algae growth down, and they poop the pink sand, and I give them the whole story. But it's wonderful. It's regularly the parrotfish is just the highlight of certain like underwater experiences and basic things people take for granted, really. But it's a really cool fish, and it's wonderful. I've been to other islands, and certainly you have too, Dr. Warren and Dr. Hochberg and Dr. Smith, where they do eat them. And you look and you're like, oh, well, you don't have to be a scientist, with all due respect, to like recognize dead coral. You're like, goodness, like what is going on? And you'll find, okay, they do consume their parrotfish and there's issues there. But I think that like what's important is, what would be great to get an understanding of is, how can someone sort of outside of the science and policy realm, what can they do to help keep our ocean healthy? What can just the average person do to help contribute to a healthy ocean? Anyone?
Well, I think one of the ways right at the moment is the invasive lionfish. We haven't really mentioned that too much this evening.
We'll know.
But we have we issue special permits to people to go and hunt them, and it's a fun activity, and you're doing something to help the ocean. These fish don't have any predators in the Atlantic Ocean. They gobble up all the lots of young fish. So I think that is one thing that somebody who loves to be in the ocean and wants to do something good can do at the moment.
Nice. Dr. Smith, you got any ideas what someone can, just a regular person can do to help keep our ocean healthy? Thank you, Dr. Warren.
I think for people, it's really to be, it's really, in some ways, it's responsible for us. There's a lot of people who are enthusiastic, but if they don't know anything, they can't really know what to do. So they're not necessarily going to come up with that idea right away. So I think responsibilities of places like where I work at the aquarium or at BIOS, our job is to.
Let's give Dr. Smith a moment. We've all been here before. Dr. Hochberg, I'm going to cue you up and give Robbie a minute or two. But yeah, wait, we're doing some stuff. Yeah, what do you think someone that outside of the science and policy can do to help keep our ocean healthy?
Well, so I'm gonna make a guess at what Robbie was gonna say. I think he's talking about we need to educate people. I have an idea of something that people can do. Anybody can clean up after yourself. That what you know, especially in a coastal community like Bermuda, what you put on the ground ends up in the ocean. That's where it goes. And you know, we do beach cleanups and people do ocean cleanups. And Robbie is studying about plastics in the ocean. And you know, there are microplastics that fish eat, and there are big plastics. And go out. I'm doing research out at North Rock or Hog Reef, and I see plastic floating by, like I'm far away from shore. What? Just pick it up, put it in a garbage can, and you know, that's my one thing. I'm not trying to be a jerk about it.
No.
But we can clean up after ourselves, and of course, up and down the east coast of the U.S., they can do that too, and that would go a long way for just reducing the garbage in the ocean, I think. I'll cede my time back to Robbie now that he's back.
Welcome back, Dr. Smith.
Eric, that was a good point to make. This, you know, we have some responsibility in Bermuda. We've done some work to look at how much Bermuda litter, you know, gets away, and it's not trivial. So we wanted to really up that game. But I think, you know, the idea of what people can do is just really have positive conversations to get enthusiastic. Weldon's such a great ambassador for our ocean when he talks to people for the first time, to get people out of a sense of complacency that things are okay, or, you know, I don't have to worry about it. Well, you should worry about it, but maybe you don't have to get up and go do something, but at least be willing to listen to someone else, or offer something that you know that maybe your cousin and uncle, grandparents isn't aware of, or a young person in particular, and to let them know what you know. And so to keep spreading a sort of a positive message about, you know, we are so lucky to have such a healthy environment. We've been caring for it. It's got a great future if we can all pay attention to some of the challenges. So do your part of being supportive and willing to listen, willing to learn, and take advantage of opportunities to hear people come and talk about things, whether it's on a forum like this or other opportunities when we ever get back into a live setting. But there's ways we can help encourage people to pay attention and be enthusiastic about trying to help with changes, because they're going to come.
Indeed. And get involved with BOPP. I think what we're doing here is certainly something worth joining and getting involved with, and the ocean's certainly worth fighting for. So yeah, we got learn how to dive, free dive or scuba dive, get your spear and get out there and call the invasive lionfish. And certainly when you're out there, certainly pick up after yourself and pick up some debris. Anything else that you might find that you can fit into your bag, and take that home and have that properly disposed of. I think it's important. And, you know, so we can certainly talk at length about the plastics pollution issue, how things break down and how it gets into the ecosystem and whatnot. It's such a vast topic, and it's tough to really stay optimistic, I'll admit, because, you know, there's usually seems to be, you know, no end to it all. I just like drink tap water, eat less meat, pick up after yourself, and eat them to beat them, hunt invasive lionfish. That's probably a great start. And certainly getting out there and, you know, not overlooking the adults, you know, in the room or on the call, but, you know, engaging kids and getting them switched on at an early age is very important as well. Just swimming, right? We've talked about, you know, growing up in Bermuda in the 70s and 80s, where, you know, we were told like there's monsters in the water. So, you know, you have this fear of the ocean, and that fear that you'd inherit, it creates barriers to all kinds of things. It's just understanding the ocean, getting your eyes in the ocean, swimming and snorkeling, free diving, scuba diving, and then also just boating. You know, I know people that won't go out on boats because they don't know how to swim. I'm like, it's non-mariners. This is boat day. You're not going out, learn how to swim and get out there. Yes, Dr. Smith.
I think, we have benefited so much for the last several decades, initially with the work that BIOS did by opening up opportunities for young Bermudians. I was one of them in 1977. Tammy worked for me when I had a lab there, and we've just had a generation and a bit going on in terms of taking advantage of to jump in and learn something about science, or just really enjoy being in the water, being mentored, being given an opportunity to do some projects. And for the significance of BIOS and to the Bermuda Zoo Society and the aquarium to keep finding ways to engage young people, it keeps producing things. I'll also point out that BIOS's role in marine science education goes back a really long way as well. And right now Eric's getting ready to teach another coral reef ecology course, and the students come from all over. Sometimes Bermudans are there, sometimes they aren't, but this is one step that I've seen when I was doing that back in the 90s, is that you get young people involved and they experience Bermuda as a young scientist. They go away, they go on to become professors. They don't forget about Bermuda. That BIOS is creating legacy for people to realize where Bermuda is, what's going on. So when we do things here, there's an audience out there of other scientists that say, oh yeah, I remember when I was taking that course from Eric back in 2021. And that really, the significance of that is really just really very, very, very strong in terms of people's ideas about, oh, I got a really great science idea. I should be doing that in Bermuda. So BIOS is feeding, creating a feed of both Bermudian and non-Bermudian young scientists that will really pay dividends down the road. It certainly did for me in lots of other ways. So education is really important factor, and we've been really, really lucky to have the ability to raise funds to run these programs with some really dynamic individuals over time, and Bermuda's have benefited. So the current generation, the one behind me, because you're all a bit younger than me, we're so much better off and better prepared for people to be able to listen to information and say, that does make sense. I heard about that when I was 17 or 27 or 37. So that really sets us up, and I feel optimistic that because of the pervasiveness and the success of our programs with BIOS, BAMS, and other institutions as well, that we've got a pretty well-educated group of Bermudians and long-term residents here that'll help solve the problems.
Yeah, for sure. I think that more people today seem to be a lot more switched on and engaged, and that could be part of I guess a global awareness bit. More out there, whether it's documentaries on Netflix that are getting people switched on, or short films on YouTube, or the wonderful outreach and community engagement from our local blue and green, I call them, institutions. Certainly, even with everything that I thought I was involved with, it was once I got involved with BOPP, I was really given the opportunity to really do a much deeper dive into all the organizations, individuals, businesses, and entities that are in the space, and it's vast, especially when it comes to it's you dabble in science and biology, but then once it comes to getting a career in the space and getting a job in the space, I find it's a bit difficult to navigate at times, right? A lot of that kind of comes into sort of maybe perhaps blue economy, which is one of our cornerstones as well. So what I wanted to touch on real quick, and Dr. Warren, if you've got a moment, I just want to think of maybe an example or two you can think of that represents a sustainable blue economy. Just switching gears more into some BE stuff.
Blue economy. Well, I think one of the things that BOPP was looking at, they were looking at a couple of industries that make up the blue economy. There were fisheries and blue tourism and renewable energy.
Hot topics. So,
yes, so those are some hot topics. One of the things that we're looking at in fisheries, I know we talked about depletion of our reef fish stocks, but we have highly migratory species out there, pelagics, that Bermudians, I feel, harvest sustainably. Most of these species are harvested hook and line, rod and reel, trolling, and what we're looking to do to increase fisheries profit in fisheries is to increase harvest of these species. And so, that's, I think, one example of how, we can grow the blue economy in a sustainable manner. Now, some people will say some of these tunas aren't doing well, and that is true. There are some tuna species that are not doing well. There's an international body that I represent Bermuda in, the International Commission for Conservation of Atlantic Tunas, and they're responsible for the management of tunas in the Atlantic Ocean. And, they are doing their best. They're certainly not perfect, but they do have rebuilding plans for species that do fall into the overfished category. But yellowfin tuna, wahoo, those are things that we catch quite a bit of, and I think that they can be increased sustainably.
Cool. I got something in my mind that I want to talk to you maybe offline, but it was not to do with blue economy, but the whole notion of how the culturally or traditionally the community will evolve, a trash fish or trash species becoming, the creme de la creme, and you mentioned the hind, and I remember one time like lobster was even considered, y'all give those guys a lobster, we don't want that. And then now it's like the sought after thing. So we can always come back to that. I just love, again, the history and how we get those different changes where, and that happens. But we've got a couple of questions from the audience. And one of them is that the question is just recognizing that there are big global stressors on the ocean. And this kind of speaks to what we were just talking about. What can Bermuda do at a local scale to help mitigate? So I just think of what we just said about the passing pelagics. We can have those control mechanisms in place to regulate fishing and, make sure people, I guess, keep their take reasonable, but then those things move on, so what more can we do, I guess, on a local scale to help with that?
Well, I think we're doing what we can on a local scale. We being such a small island are not really the problem when it comes to these highly migratory species, but that's why they need to be managed, regionally, like that, because they do go on, and there are quotas that are set for countries to stay within.
Interesting. Thank you. Another question from our live viewership is, it's so cool to hear about the history of ocean policy. What can Bermuda do to continue to lead in marine management around the world?
Well, I think we are doing it. In BOPP, you had heard at the beginning that the government has committed to protecting 20% of our exclusive economic zone. And I think that's a really big step. And I really think that they need to be commended for that. Now, some people have complained that it should be 30% because there are other countries that are looking at 30% or more. But there are also many other countries that, haven't protected.
This is true.
Sorry, some of our, neighbors to the south, if you look, less than 1% of their waters are fully protected. So I do think that we are, we might not be right out in the front of the pack, but we're certainly one of the leaders in the space. Yeah,
that's how I feel as well, just talking to peers around the region. Dr. Smith, and I got a question that's probably for you as well, but yeah.
Just want to add to Tammy's response there is that 20% is going to be really beneficial. And when we look at marine management, we generally see that once you start and the people who are invested in that, the stakeholders, as we call them, are fishermen or snorkelers or divers, and they look and see how those protected areas are functioning, then they begin to become advocates for more protection. So 20% will get us going somewhere. We've done a lot with what we've done here, but mostly on how we use things, not where we do things. And that's what our marine spatial plan is going to kind of direct some activities to be dialed up or dialed down. But if we learn from other jurisdictions, we'll be able to see that if we can make some progress, people begin to see the benefits, and then they want to have more. So, wouldn't surprise me somewhere down the road we'll be at a lot higher
Yep.
percent.
That'll be
We have a lot to play with, and we use some of it intensively. Other parts we don't use hardly at all, but we have more to learn about particular offshore waters and what they're doing out there. So people shouldn't be too concerned that we're not doing enough. We're not right up there with some places like St. Helena. They've sent their whole EEZ apart as a no take zone, that because it's not important for them for those reasons. But we wouldn't necessarily consider doing that here at this point in time. So we pay attention to successes in other jurisdictions, and we have been a good model for other jurisdictions. And I wish our friends and neighbors and cousins down south would pay attention to what we've been doing, because they'll get those benefits sooner rather than later if they begin to modify what they're doing with their fisheries extractions.
So cool. Dr. Hochberg, you've seen some stuff. You've got like a plane that takes like 3D pictures of the coral and stuff, which is pretty dope. We need to have a live where you just tell us all about that, because I remember looking at it, I'm like, wow, okay. I was like, are you telling me I don't have to dive to see the bottom of the ocean anymore? I kind of was like, I don't know if I like that. But so, I mean, the question I have, Dr. Hochberg, is, so what makes the ocean surrounding Bermuda, the platform essentially, so unique compared to other places around the planet that you've seen yourself?
Well, so unique is, I'm gonna answer that question from a scientist perspective.
Sure.
Is that the uniqueness is the access. That Bermuda sits in the middle of, sort of on the side of the North Atlantic subtropical gyre, right? We're in the Sargasso Sea, this giant body of water that's circulating around the North Atlantic. There's one in the South Atlantic, there's one in the North Pacific and the South Pacific. And a lot of the world's ocean is this kind of water, this blue water, really clear, really subtropical. But there's not a lot of places like Bermuda that has the aquarium, that has BAMs, that has BIOS, that can go out and study it so easily. That not only the deep blue water, but also the nearshore reefs. So having the facilities and the logistics that we have onshore here, and those environments are literally, it's a half a mile from my house.
Eric, it's so like accessibility. It's so wild how I take it for granted still, but it's so cool.
But so the access is key. Now that lets us ask and answer these questions of the local, regional, and global ocean that we can then pass on to the decision makers, the policy makers. So access, it's location, location, location.
Thank you. Yeah, I tend to tell people like the ocean is never more than a mile away, no matter where you are in Bermuda. So, and it's just so cool. I'll just be, riding to work and I'll see, colleagues from BZS at T-Dock heading out, or see Endurance heading out. I'm like, wow, it's so cool. Like the ocean is just everywhere. It's such a privilege. But guys, it's already almost 7 o'clock. I knew this hour would go by so quickly. I got questions on I got questions myself, and there's some questions from the audience about like what are some techniques for assessing fish populations. So I know Dr. Warren, like there's some hydrophone stuff, but we can talk about that at length, I'm sure. But I don't want to keep you guys on the call and go into overtime necessarily. I certainly want to thank all of you, our panelists, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on this first virtual Beachside Chat episode 1. We hope that this does become a series. Not too sure when the next one's going to be, but we'll flesh that out quite quickly. Thank you so much to our live viewership and to everyone that's watching this on replay. I hope you got something out of it. Visit BermudaOceanProsperity.org. That's our website. We're all across social media as well. So shout out to everyone at DENR and the Bermuda government, everyone at BIOS, and everyone at BZS, and everyone that's involved in the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program, everyone that's working tirelessly to make this happen. And yeah, I'm excited for the future. It's bright. The future is definitely bright. And thank you so much for all your hard work, Dr. Warren, Dr. Smith, and Dr. Hochberg. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Great. We got a few moments for any last words, but otherwise, it's a wrap. Thank you so much.